Is it wrong that I love that deal more or like that deal more for Philly than I would Portland?
Nope. You're right to.
All right, Mark. Portland. We got to talk about the Blazers. Damian Lillard more or less insinuated before the start of the offseason that he wanted some drastic changes with the Blazers this year. He wanted to see a much improved roster, and I think the answer to his wishes has been because it's basically the same old roster as it was a couple months ago. There were no drastic changes made. Where the hell do they go from here?
Well, the problem that they face is the one they faced for the last few years of this team now, which is that the clear-cut way to improve the team on the court is to move CJ McCollum, who, of course, we are led to believe is Dame's best friend. McCollum's good. It's not his failing whatsoever. He's a good player. His contract is big, but he justifies it with his production. He can get his own. He's going to age quite well with that shooting ability of his. It's not his fault. It's merely the fact that it's a little bit superfluous to have him and Dame on the court, considering that McCollum is essentially a lesser version of Dame. I've oversimplified that for the point of making an argument, right. But you take my point. They are shot-creating, isolation-heavy guards. It does mean that Portland's spending power and assets are taken up in that superfluousness in the backcourt, leaving their front court too short. They have some decent players in the front court, but when no one can take a dribble outside of the painted area, they're limiting their offensive creativity, as Terry Stotts found out. And the remedy for that, particularly if we were to talk about a Simmons deal, there's surely scope, in theory, for a McCollum and Simmons deal with specifics to be worked out. Lord knows it's one that's been talked about for years. It's one that people keep coming back to because each fits the profile of the other team's needs quite well. But that's Dame's boy. If you want to please him, it's very hard to justify trading his boy like that. They haven't done it. They've shown pretty much no enthusiasm for ever doing it. And that is perhaps how it's going to stay. So then that leaves a difficult situation where you're looking at trading. You haven't got an awful lot else to move. You'd have to look at moving Yusuf Nurkic. Now, he's an injury factor. We know that. But he's also the ultimate small ball punisher. He's a lesser Jonas Valanciunas, but he's a good player himself. He's on a tradable contract, but it's not one that's tied down long term. He's not a needle mover. How much value are you going to get for a player like that? Then you've got Norm Powell, who's the backup guard, who's not going to... You start struggling after that. With Norm Powell, with Robert Covington, with Derek Jones, you've got good players, but you don't have answers to any of the problems that Portland found that they were struggling too much with last year. And you're not going to be able to get them in this carnation just by changing out Harry Giles for Greg Brown, just by letting Carmelo walk. That's not going to change things. So, pass. I'm not a problem solver. I'm a problem pointer outer. That's what I
know. But you point them out pretty well because you're absolutely right. I think also if you move McCollum, even though that would be a tough pill to swallow simply because he's that good, you could at least mimic some of the actions by putting Anthony Simons into that role. I realize that's not optimal. You probably want to do it with Norman Powell, but there is that guard depth there. If you pivot away from Powell instead and keep CJ around, then you could effectively have Simons take over Powell's role. I mean, there is a guy there in Simons, who I think can come in and absorb some of those available minutes, thus allowing them to move out of certain guys. I think it just boils down to what's the market. Norman Powell re-signed, was it 5 years, 90 million if memory serves? Was it not? Somewhere along those lines?
I refer you to previous discussion about how I don't know anything unless I've got it in front of me.
We were covering it live 2 weeks ago, though.
Yeah, but I've just been so busy, as far as you know. He's resigned for a good amount of money, and he has earned it. He was once a bad contract himself. We talked about Tim Hardaway earlier. He was a bad contract. He got dealt as one. He redeemed it. Sorry, he didn't get dealt as one. Hardaway did. Powell just redeemed it with greatly improved play. He's a good player, but he's not a needle mover, and he won't be able to be... you won't be able to construct a trade for such a needle mover around him alone, and the Blazers are hardly replete with assets in order to sweeten too many deals, so it is going to be difficult.
So let's workshop that idea. Like the CJ McCollum, Ben Simmons should it be a straight up deal? Who should add something if not? What are we looking at here? We're losing the balance weight.
We're losing already both of your Blazer and Sixer fans because we're not breaking new ground here. This has been a pretty hackneyed topic of discussion, and you'd have to think, or I would at least posit the idea that if it was going to happen, it would have done. Then again, things have changed with Simmons
right
after last postseason, so maybe it is now on the table in a way that it wasn't before. But hey, I like the idea of Simmons with Lillard. I like the idea of Simmons with Nurkic, sort of. I think it greatly rebalances a roster that is far too backcourt reliant, as said upon before. You could get Simmons his primary and secondary playmaking spots alongside Dame when you're also talking about, you know, Covington and Jones and just role players that don't create or handle outside. You could get a nice role for Simmons there. How you'd package that deal, I pass.
Right.
I'm going to keep passing.
No, but
if you don't have any opinions, then no one can be a twat to you on Twitter. That's what I've learned.
This is true. I love your Dennis Schroeder mentality. Just, yeah.
You take that back.
All right, but is it wrong that I love that deal more, or like that deal more for Philly than I would Portland?
Nope. You're right to. Bear in mind, however, the difference in age.
Right.
I know you're a big fan of McCollum. You should be. He's good. And he's a good citizen on a decent, it's large, but it's a productive contract. He's a player that would benefit any team in the league, full stop. But he's quite a bit older than Simmons. So This is peak McCollum, and it shouldn't be peak Simmons. So do bear that in mind.
That said, I think it's reasonable to wonder just how much Ben Simmons has improved over the first 4 years of his career.
Yeah, he hasn't much. That's not to say that he won't, though. He did miss 1 year. He did. Right. He has had to pair with Joel Embiid, which has never been the optimum fit when we talk about spacing. He has at least improved defensively, whilst the offensive game has perhaps regressed in some ways. The defense has got better. So there should be a lot more to come from him than there has been. And I appreciate he has stagnated rather than continually grown. If he hadn't stagnated, then we wouldn't be talking about him potentially being dealt. But he is still young. The impudence of youth passes eventually. There's reason to believe that if you're taking him on, you're not taking him on as is. You're taking him on as is with potential upside.
Yeah. The thing is, though, if that potential upside never really shows, that would be a pretty difficult position for Portland to find themselves in down the line.
As opposed to what, though? As opposed to now?
Well,
now it's a very different position for a different reason.
True. That said, it's 4 years of Ben Simmons. And I agree, you can get out of that contract. Not saying you can't. But at the same time, you're still going to use at least a couple years to try to figure out once and for all, what do we have here? In which case, when everything is said and done and the league has sort of like read the book on Simmons and knows that it seems like we can't move past this. Like he is what he is, which is a bloody good defender, by the way, and a tremendous rebounder, strong court vision. Like he's always going to have a pretty decent baseline there. So I'm not going to ever label him as a bad player, of course, but under those circumstances, he would be, in my opinion, definitely a little bit overpaid, if not significantly so. Can the Blazers move on from one cap held to another while still getting the best out of Dame's last years? I think honestly, that's probably the pressing issue for me. It's Dame. It's the fact that he's 31 now. He's in his prime. You kind of want to use the next 2 to 3 years to really optimize him and his skill set. Do you put yourself into the best situation of doing that by somewhat gambling on acquiring Ben Simmons?
No, but I never said it was Simmons or bust.
That's true.
It's logical, perhaps, but it's not binary in the sense that they either trade for Simmons or give up Lillard. That's just something we've created here. Lillard will age quite well. Yes, he's, I believe, is it 13 years in now? That's quite a lot, but he will age quite well simply because that shooting touch won't leave you, even if the mobility and stamina do. So to get someone who's not too young but not too old so as to extend that timeline and potentially open up a window in the twilight of Dame's career in a Chris Paul style would be a way to go. I think Simmons fits that profile. I think he would help on the court somewhat, but I don't think it's all in on him or nothing. I don't think that at all. I mean, not when we're in a world where Pascal Siakam could be available, for example. So it's not nearly that binary.
CJ McCollum is 8 years in, not 13.
Who said 13? No, Lillard was 13, not McCollum.
Apologies. I thought you said McCollum.
I ain't that bad, dude.
No, but
I think
even Dame.
Wasn't he? 6th pick?
Dame is 9 years in.
Where the bloody hell did I get that from then? I am that bad. I used to be good, man. I'm washed up.
Well, it does seem like he's been in the league for. He came in.
I was basically on when you said 31, but he was the rare upperclassman pick, wasn't he?
He was. Weber State, 22 years old when he came in. He's an old 22. One. Yeah. It's because he's 31, obviously. So most guys come in at 18. I totally get it. But yeah,
good save.
I definitely look at this.
I wonder why I'm not as popular as I used to be. Carry on.
Well, you're popular enough to be on this show. That counts for something.
Hello, Denmark.
Yeah.
Asbjørn Midtgaard for the win. He signed, didn't he, somewhere? He signed in Holland today, didn't he?
He did, yes. CC
Leiden. Have I pronounced that properly? Asbjørn Midtgaard.
I think I don't know if Asbjørn is listening in, but I'll definitely send him the link to this one. He'll appreciate that.
Hello, Asbjørn. I'm trying to get your name right, but I'm English, and
that was very well. That is a lot better than I actually heard. You just did it right. That was very well done. Yeah.
Asbjørn.
And now you kind of lost it. You did it right before.
Well, what was the difference between that and the one before? That was the same.
You said it quicker. It's Asbjørn.
Asbjørn.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Asbjørn.
Yeah.
Hello, Asbjørn. Enjoy. Good luck.
Enjoy Holland. Yeah. Definitely. Congratulations to Asbjørn Midtgaard, and also congratulations Ife Lundberg to return to CSKA Moscow.
I didn't see that one. Okay.
He's back in Moscow, and I think next year is going to be the year that he breaks through and makes the league, because
what age will he be then? 27?
He's going to be 27 right before the start of this year, so it's probably going to be
he'll be 27, 28 next year. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So it's
well, he's put himself in contention, so fair enough.
He's been playing really well. So this is not something I get to talk a lot about with Bryan.
Yes, welcome to the NBA show with Morten and Mark, who are talking about Danish players that haven't yet to play in the NBA.
The NBA Summer League counts pseudo.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? No, but going back to Portland, when I look at that roster, I'm just overall uninspired. Like, even if you move CJ McCollum and stuff around for Ben Simmons, you were talking about hitting the margins recently, and I wonder if that's something that they have done well enough over the years to have gathered a roster that you can really, find bit players in. Because right now I'm not super optimistic about the end of the bench. Like, I like Ben McLemore for the minimum. I like Cody Zeller at the minimum. That's fine. Does it move the needle any? Not sure. Derek Jones Jr. was pretty underwhelming in his first year. Maybe there's a bounce back. That's great. But what is his realistic upside there? Like Robert Covington, solid two-way guy, really did not have a good year last year at all. Like, what is the best potential here?
Yeah, Covington was a bit of a letdown. They certainly need more from him if there is to be any kind of window. They suffered from a lack of front court athleticism last year with the Nurkic-Kant pairing. Cody Zeller will help with that. Jones, I think, perhaps slightly more highly of than what you've just said there. But more than anything, those guys are role players that need something to roll around. So, yeah, I keep coming back to the idea of an imbalance in the team as constructed, where far too much is relied upon the backcourt creation, and the front court is spotty with its spacing and defensively suboptimal as well. Yes, Zeller won't change that of his own back. It's a decent bit of business. When it comes to working the margins, they put themselves in the hole with the egregious 2016 spending. And that's technically, yes, that's all now expired, but the price there is still being paid because they weren't able to make subsequent acquisitions in the following years that they can still be reaping the benefits of now. So, yeah, I do agree. I don't dislike their moves in isolation that they've made recently, even such as signing Harry Giles last year to a minimum salary, is evidence of the fact that they can see quality. It just doesn't always cohere that well because Giles just compounded the front court 5-spot defense problem. So, pass. I finally found that catchphrase I've been looking for. Pass.
So, I think the apron this year is 143 million, right? Somewhere along the lines of that.
Yeah.
Us.
So,
Okay.
yeah, the tax is 136.414, isn't it? So, yeah.
All right. And the Blazers right now, according to Spotrac, active roster cap is at 134 million, which means that theoretically they should still be able to take on a sign and trade contract, if I understand the
As
CBA
long as you
correctly.
finish below the apron, yes.
Exactly.
Oh, I know where you're going. I know where you're
Yeah,
going.
you absolutely
ahead.
know where I'm going.
Bring it full circle.
Well, I mean, you just brought up the lack of spacing in the front court. Lauri Markkanen. I don't know what they give back. Like Derek Jones Jr. Maybe. I don't know if that. I mean, I don't know if that makes sense for him, but they would definitely get more shooting in the front court. They won't get a legitimate big man.
If I was Portland, I'd trade Derek Jones Jr. for Lauri Markkanen, definitely. As Chicago, I
Wouldn't.
I'd rather have Lowry back on the QO for
Right.
the roughly the same amount of money as you're paying Jones for 1 year. But if it's better than nothing, which is still an option until it isn't. So yes,
Right.
well done for bringing that full circle. You are an absolute pro.
Knowing the Bulls, they would probably ask for Robert Covington, though.
I say you're a pro. You did earlier use the word to describe the team. So there's work to do. We'll put it in your feedback form.
Well, I mean, let's be realistic here. We live in a world where Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless make more than the NBA average, actually, more than the NBA minimum. So
I've never heard either of them use a fart sound to describe an emotion, though, before. So
that's so funny because whenever I hear Skip Bayless talk, that's all I hear.
Sassy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, but I'm saying the Bulls might ask back for Robert Covington based on his somewhat weak season, and if I'm Portland, I don't know if I do that.
No, I wouldn't, because you have invested in Covington. You need more from him. So, Covington, again, is in his prime, perhaps based on what we saw last year, slightly past his prime. But he's, in theory, a very good player to pair with a Lillard and or a Lillard-McCollum backcourt, even if we didn't see all that much of it last year. So, no, neither would I.